Welcome to Blurred Lines. I'm Jay, and these are true horror stories. To protect the people who shared them, names and identifying details have been changed, but everything else is exactly as they experienced it. This happened in March 2018 when I was 24. I was living in this older apartment building downtown, and the laundry room in the basement had been broken for like 2 weeks. Management kept saying they'd fix it, but nothing was happening. I had a huge pile of dirty clothes, and it was becoming a real problem. I was working night shifts at the time, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., at a call center handling customer service for West Coast clients. My schedule was completely flipped. I'd get home around 7:30 in the morning, sleep until mid-afternoon, have a few hours to deal with life stuff, then head back to work. It made everything complicated, especially laundry. The 24-hour laundromat about 3 blocks away was my only option, but even their 24 hours had a catch, between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. They only had one attendant working who spent most of their time in the back office. I'd been putting off laundry for weeks because I hated going during those dead hours, but I was literally out of clean work clothes. It was a Tuesday night, technically Wednesday morning. I got out of work at 7 a.m. like usual, but instead of going straight home, I had to stay for a mandatory staff meeting that ran until almost 9 a.m. By the time I got home, crashed, and woke up, it was already 5 p.m. I had to be back at work in 6 hours, and I had nothing clean to wear. I figured if I went to the laundromat around 2 a.m., I could do a quick wash and dry cycle and still get a few hours of sleep before my next shift. It wasn't ideal, but I was desperate. Around 1:45 a.m., I threw all my stuff in a duffel bag and walked over. The street was completely empty, that dead of night emptiness where you can hear your own footsteps too clearly. A few streetlights were out, making the walk creepier than usual, but I'd done it before and it was only 3 blocks. The laundromat was huge, one of those industrial places with maybe 50 or 60 machines. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, rows and rows of washers and dryers. At this hour, the lights seemed almost aggressive, too bright against the darkness outside the windows. When I walked in, there was only one other person there. An older woman folding clothes at the far end near the back wall. She glanced up when I came in, then went back to her folding. Seeing someone else there actually made me feel better. At least I wasn't completely alone. I picked a washer in the middle section, loaded my clothes, added detergent, got it going. Then I sat down in one of those plastic chairs they have and pulled out my phone. I'd been sitting there maybe 20 minutes, just scrolling, when I heard a man's voice. It sounded like he was talking on the phone or maybe to himself. The voice was coming from somewhere in the rows of machines, but the way the sound bounced around in there made it hard to pinpoint exactly where. The acoustics were weird. The voice kept going, just talking steadily. I thought maybe someone was on a call, but it went on for several minutes without any pauses like there was someone responding. Just continuous talking. I found it kind of unsettling in that big empty space, especially at this hour. After about 5 minutes of this, I decided to call out. "Hello? Is someone there?" The voice cut off immediately. Like mid-sentence just stopped. Complete silence except for the hum of the washing machines. I waited, listening. Nothing. No response, no more voice. The silence felt heavy after all that talking. I looked over at the older woman. She was still folding her clothes, didn't seem to have noticed anything. But I was thoroughly creeped out now. I still had like 40 minutes left on my wash cycle, but I decided I'd just move to a different part of the laundromat. The section near the attendant window felt safer. There was supposed to be an attendant on duty, but the window was empty at the moment. Signs said they were on break. When my washer finished, I transferred everything to dryers near the attendant window, put my quarters in, got them going. Then I sat in a chair, where I had a good view of most of the laundromat. The older woman left at some point. I didn't see her go, just looked up and she was gone. Now it was completely empty except for me. An hour passed. It was past 3 a.m. now. My dryer's finished and I started loading my clothes into my duffel bag. I was at one of the folding tables, stuffing things in, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. There was a man walking over toward me. He was maybe in his 30s, wearing jeans and a hoodie, and he had his phone in his hand. He walked right up to the chairs next to the folding table and sat down. Just sat there and started scrolling on his phone like it was totally normal. The thing was, there were at least 30 empty chairs scattered around the laundromat. But he chose to sit in the section right next to where I was standing. Like right there, maybe 6 feet away. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude. I said hey in a friendly way. He glanced up, nodded, then went back to his phone. Didn't say anything. I continued packing my clothes, moving a little faster now. The silence was awkward. After a minute I said, "Weird being the only ones here this late, huh?" He looked up again. Didn't smile. Just said yep in this flat voice, then looked back at his phone. That was it. Just yep. No conversation, no elaboration. He just sat there scrolling. I was almost done packing when I heard it. The distinct sound of coins dropping into a machine. The metallic clink 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 of quarters going into a coin slot. It came from directly behind me in the row of washers I'd been looking at just a minute ago. My heart dropped. Someone else was here. Someone had just started a machine in a section I could have sworn was empty moments before. I slowly turned around and looked at the row of washers. I couldn't see anyone, but I heard a machine starting its cycle. Someone was there. Had been there, standing in that row while I'd been packing my clothes. I looked back at the man sitting near me. He'd stopped scrolling. He was just staring at me now, not at his phone anymore, at me, and his face was completely blank. No expression at all. Just these cold, empty eyes. I didn't think. I grabbed my duffel bag. It was only half packed, clothes still hanging out of it, and I ran, just bolted for the door. I heard the plastic chair scrape behind me as he stood up, heard footsteps, multiple sets, following me as I shoved the door open and ran onto the street. I ran the 3 blocks back to my apartment building as fast as I could. Duffel bag bouncing against my side, clothes falling out onto the sidewalk. I didn't stop to pick them up. I could hear footsteps behind me for the first block, then they faded. I don't know if they gave up or if I'd just gotten far enough ahead. The streets were completely dead at that hour. No cars, no people, nobody to hear me if I screamed. I've never felt more vulnerable in my life. I made it to my building, punched in the code, got inside and locked the door behind me. I was shaking so badly I could barely get my apartment key in the lock. Once I was inside, I put the chain on and called the police. They came and took my statement. 2 officers went to check the laundromat. When they came back, they said all my stuff was gone. The clothes I'd left on the folding table, my detergent, even the duffel bag I'd dropped near the door when I ran. Everything. But that wasn't what bothered them. They'd reviewed the security footage with the attendant who'd come back from break. The attendant said they'd been gone maybe 15 minutes total. The officer showed me some of the footage on his phone. There I am, loading my first washer around 1:50 a.m. And there, in the background between the rows of machines, you can see someone. Just standing there in the gap between dryers, watching me. I hadn't seen him at all when I was there. The footage shows me moving to the dryers near the attendant window. And within minutes, that same figure moves closer. You can see him walking slowly along the rows, always staying just out of my direct line of sight, but getting closer to where I'd relocated. Then the timestamp jumps to around 3:15 a.m. I'm at the folding table. The man in the hoodie enters from the front door and walks directly to me, sits down. And in the background, barely visible in the gap between machines, the first guy is there, positioned in the row behind me. That's who put the coins in the machine. They'd been coordinating. One approaches and sits down, keeps my attention, while the other positions behind me. The officer said it was textbook predatory behavior. He said the way they moved on camera, they'd done this before. The footage showed them entering the laundromat together at 1:45 a.m. 5 minutes before I got there. They'd been waiting. The attendant said there'd been 2 other people who'd come in to do laundry that evening before me, but both had been men. I was the first woman who'd come in alone, especially at that hour. The police never identified them. The footage wasn't clear enough for facial recognition, and they'd left right after I ran. Didn't go back for any vehicle nearby that the cops could find. The laundromat added more cameras and changed their policy about the attendant leaving the window, especially during those dead hours. But I never went back there. I ended up buying a portable washing machine for my apartment. One of those compact ones you can hook up to your sink. Cost me like $300, but it was worth it. It was supposed to be a relaxing girls' weekend. Just me and my friend Melissa getting away from the city for a few days at her family's lake house in northern Minnesota. We'd been planning it for months. One of those things you talk about doing forever and finally commit to when you realize you desperately need a break from real life. I drove up Friday afternoon, about 3 hours north of Minneapolis. The lake house was exactly what you'd picture. A 2-story cabin-style place right on the water, surrounded by pine trees, with a dock extending out into the lake. It was early September, so the summer crowds were gone, but the weather was still warm. Perfect timing. Melissa had arrived the day before to open up the place and stock the fridge. When I pulled up, she was already sitting on the dock with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. That's the kind of friend she is. We spent the afternoon catching up, sitting on that dock with our feet in the water. 1 bottle of wine turned into 2. By the time the sun started setting, we were both pretty buzzed and decided to make pasta for dinner. We ate on the screened porch overlooking the lake, and then opened a 3rd bottle of wine because why not? It was vacation. Around 11 p.m., Melissa suggested we call it a night. She'd been yawning for the past hour, and honestly, I was exhausted too. The drive, plus the wine, plus the sun had wiped me out. "You should take the loft bedroom," she said as we cleaned up the dishes. "It has the best view of the lake. You'll love waking up to it." I'd noticed the loft when I first arrived. There was a wooden ladder in the main living area leading up to what looked like an open bedroom space overlooking everything below. It seemed cozy and private, like something out of a magazine. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I don't want to take the best room." "I'm taking my parents' room on the main floor," she said. "I like being near the bathroom at night anyway. Plus, you're the guest." The wine made the decision easy. I grabbed my bag and climbed the ladder up to the loft. It was exactly as charming as I'd expected. A full-size bed with a thick quilt, a small nightstand, and 2 windows overlooking the lake. There was an old wooden chair in the corner near one of the windows, the kind with spindle backs that you see in antique shops. The ceiling sloped down on both sides following the roofline, giving the space a cozy, enclosed feeling. I changed into pajamas, brushed my teeth in the downstairs bathroom, then climbed back up the ladder. Melissa called goodnight from her room, and I heard her door close. The loft didn't have a door, just the open space above the living room. I could hear the house settling, the occasional creak of old wood, the faint sound of water lapping against the dock outside. I turned off the small lamp on the nightstand, and the room went dark except for moonlight coming through the windows. Was asleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, needing to use the bathroom. The wine had caught up with me. I felt foggy and disoriented, still half asleep. The room was dark, but not pitch black. Enough moonlight came through the windows that I could make out shapes. That's when I saw it. In the corner, near the window, that wooden chair I'd noticed earlier. Except now there was something on it. A dark shape piled up, almost like someone sitting there. My wine-fogged brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a person. The shape had bulk at the top like shoulders, and the way it sat in the chair, it was too perfect, too deliberate to be random coats or blankets piled up. But that didn't make sense. Melissa was downstairs asleep, and even in my half-conscious state, I knew I hadn't brought enough stuff to create a pile like that. I'd hung my jacket on the hook by the ladder. It had to be Melissa's coats or winter stuff stored up here. That's what made sense. Her family probably kept their heavy coats in the loft during summer. The chair was just a convenient place to pile them. And in the darkness and my drowsy state, it looked like a person. My heart was beating faster than it should have been, but I forced myself to accept the rational explanation. It was coats, just coats on a chair. I really needed to pee, and I was too tired to freak myself out over shadows. I climbed down the ladder carefully. It was steeper than I'd remembered, and made my way to the bathroom. When I came back, I deliberately didn't look at the loft as I climbed back up. I didn't want to see that shape again. I just wanted to sleep. I pulled the quilt over my head and forced my eyes closed. My heart was still beating too fast. The wine had gone from making me sleepy to making me feel paranoid and vulnerable. I waited for my pulse to slow down, and eventually it did. Eventually, I drifted back to sleep. The second time I woke up, it was different. Birds were chirping outside. Early morning light was filtering through the windows. That gray-blue light right before sunrise. The loft was no longer dark. I could see everything clearly now. I turned my head toward the corner where the chair was. It was empty. Just an old wooden chair sitting by itself near the window. Nothing on it. No coats, no pile of fabric, nothing. My stomach dropped. I sat up fast, scanning the entire loft space. My jacket was still on the hook by the ladder where I'd left it. My bag was where I'd dropped it. Everything was exactly as I'd arranged it the night before, except that chair. That chair that had definitely had something on it when I woke up in the middle of the night. And then I heard it. A soft creaking sound from below, like someone trying to move quietly on old floorboards, or someone trying to move quietly on a wooden ladder. I went down that ladder faster than I probably should have, my hands shaking. Melissa's bedroom door was closed. I knocked, probably too loudly for how early it was. "Melissa, are you awake?" I heard her groan, then movement. The door opened and she stood there in pajamas, squinting at me with confusion. "Brooke, what time is it? Did you come up to the loft last night?" The words came out rushed. "At any point did you come up there?" "What? No. Why would I?" She was clearly still half asleep, trying to process what I was asking. There was something on the chair, in the corner. When I woke up to use the bathroom, there was something piled on the chair. It looked like a person sitting there. Melissa's expression shifted from confused to concerned. "What are you talking about?" "And now it's gone. The chair is empty, but I know what I saw." She followed me back to the base of the ladder, looking up into the loft. From down here, you could see the chair clearly in the morning light. Obviously empty. "Brooke, we don't keep anything stored up there. My parents are weird about keeping the guest space clear. There's nothing up there except the bed and furniture." Then what did I see? She climbed up the ladder and I followed her. We both stood in the loft, looking at that chair. She checked the small space under the sloped ceiling where someone could theoretically hide, but it was empty. "Just dust and old wood. Maybe you were dreaming?" she offered, but her voice wasn't entirely confident. "You did drink a lot of wine. We both did. I know the difference between a dream and being awake, Melissa." "Okay, but, I mean, there's no one here now, and I was downstairs all night. I would have heard if someone came in. Would she, though? Her room was on the opposite side of the house from the main entrance, and both of us had been pretty drunk. Someone could have come in through the porch door. We hadn't exactly been security conscious when we stumbled off to bed." "What about the porch door?" I asked. "Did you lock it?" Melissa's face went pale. I don't think so. We were out there late, and I don't remember locking it." We went through the entire house together, checking every room, every closet, every space where someone could hide. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No missing items, no evidence that anyone had been there. The porch door was unlocked, just as Melissa had feared. But that didn't prove anything. "Look," Melissa finally said, standing in the living room looking exhausted and uncomfortable. Maybe it was shadows and wine and your mind playing tricks. I mean, if someone was really up there, where did they go? We would have heard them on the ladder. That thing creaks like crazy. She was right about the ladder. It did creak, which meant I should have heard someone climbing up. But I hadn't. I'd only heard creaking when I woke up the second time, after the chair was already empty. Unless they'd climbed up before I went to sleep. Unless someone had been up there in that loft, sitting in that chair before I ever noticed them. Just sitting there in the dark, watching me sleep after I came back from the bathroom. And then, when dawn started breaking, and they knew I'd be able to see clearly, they left. Down that creaky ladder while I was in some hazy space between sleep and consciousness, the sound blending into my wine-fogged awareness, until it woke me just enough to notice they were gone. I left later that morning, made up some excuse about not feeling well, probably the wine, should probably head home. Melissa seemed relieved, honestly. The whole thing had turned weird and uncomfortable, and neither of us knew what to say about it. The drive back to Minneapolis felt longer than 3 hours. I kept thinking about that silhouette in the chair, about how it had the shape of shoulders, of a head, how it looked like someone sitting very deliberately, facing the bed. Because I know what I saw. My name is Samuel. I'm 26. After losing my job and breaking up with my girlfriend, I moved back to my hometown in rural Oregon to figure out what to do next. My uncle had left me his cabin when he died the year before, and I needed somewhere cheap to live while I got back on my feet. The cabin sits about 15 minutes outside town, tucked back in the trees on 5 acres. It's one of those places where you can't see your neighbors, and the only sounds at night are wind and animals moving through the woods. I thought the isolation would be good for me, help me clear my head. The place needed work. My uncle had been sick for a long time before he died, and it showed. Leaky faucets, windows that didn't close right, a furnace that only worked when it felt like it. But the rent was free, and I didn't have many options. The first week was actually pretty peaceful. I spent my days fixing what I could, and my evenings reading on the small deck out back. No internet, no cable, just quiet. It felt like exactly what I needed. Then I started hearing the singing. It was on a Thursday night, around 2 in the morning. I woke up to this voice coming from somewhere outside. A woman's voice, humming something I didn't recognize. It was soft, like a lullaby, but there was something off about it. The melody kept changing, like she couldn't remember how it was supposed to go. I got up and looked out the bedroom window, but I couldn't see anything. The singing seemed to be coming from the woods behind the cabin. It went on for maybe 10 minutes, then stopped. I figured it was someone camping nearby. There were hiking trails through these woods, and people sometimes set up camp even though they weren't supposed to. But it happened again the next night. Same time, same strange melody. This time I went outside with a flashlight to see if I could figure out where it was coming from. The singing stopped as soon as I opened the door. I called out, "Hello?" a few times but got no response. Just silence and the beam of my flashlight cutting through the trees. By the third night, I was getting annoyed. It was always around 2 a.m., always the same wandering melody that never seemed to resolve. I was barely sleeping. I drove into town the next day and mentioned it to the guy at the hardware store while I was buying supplies. His name was Bill, and he'd lived in the area his whole life. When I described what I was hearing, his expression changed. He asked if I was staying at the Hartley place. That was my uncle's last name. When I said yes, he got quiet for a minute. Then he told me my uncle used to come into the store talking about hearing singing at night. Bill had figured my uncle was just lonely, maybe imagining things. That made me uncomfortable. My uncle had always been sharp, even when he was sick. He wasn't the type to imagine things. Bill suggested I call the county sheriff if it kept happening. He said there were some folks who lived way back in the woods who weren't always friendly to newcomers. That night, I decided to stay up and wait for it. I sat on the deck with a cup of coffee and my flashlight, determined to figure out what was going on. At exactly 2 a.m., the singing started again, but this time it wasn't coming from deep in the woods. It was closer, much closer. It sounded like it was coming from the other side of the cabin. I crept around the side of the building, trying to follow the sound. The singing was definitely a woman's voice, but there was something wrong with it. It was too high in some places, too low in others, like someone trying to sing outside their natural range. I reached the front corner of the cabin and peered around it. There was someone standing in my driveway, a woman in a long dark dress, just standing there in the middle of the gravel, facing the cabin. She was singing with her arms at her sides, swaying slightly back and forth. I couldn't see her face clearly in the dark, but something about her posture looked strange. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call out and ask what she was doing on my property. Another part of me knew I should go back inside and lock the door. I stood there watching her for maybe 5 minutes. She never stopped singing, never looked around, just stood there swaying in my driveway like she was in a trance. Then she started walking toward the cabin. Her movement was weird. She didn't seem to be looking where she was going, but she walked in a perfectly straight line toward the front porch. The singing never stopped, never even wavered as she moved. I backed away from the corner and went around to the back door. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it and slipped inside. I locked the door behind me and went to the front window to see what she was doing. She was standing on my porch now, right in front of the door, still singing, still swaying. I could see her more clearly through the window, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Her dress was old and dirty, like she'd been wearing it for weeks. Her hair was long and tangled, but it was her face that really got to me. Even in the dim light, I could see that her eyes were closed. She was singing with her eyes closed, standing on my porch like she was sleepwalking. I watched her for another 10 minutes. She never opened her eyes, never stopped singing, never moved from that spot right in front of my door. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the singing stopped. She stood there in silence for a moment, then turned and walked back down the driveway the same way she'd come, still with her eyes closed, still moving in that strange, purposeful way. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, I found footprints in the gravel where she'd been standing. Small feet, like a woman's, but they were deep impressions, like she'd been standing there for a long time. I called the sheriff's office. A deputy came out that afternoon and looked around. He took pictures of the footprints and asked me to describe what I'd seen. When I finished, he asked if I knew anything about my uncle's medical history. I told him my uncle had been sick, but mentally he was fine. The deputy said my uncle had called them several times over the past few years about a woman singing on his property at night. They'd come out to investigate, but never found anyone. The deputy suggested I install some motion sensor lights and keep my doors locked. He said there were some people living off the grid back in the woods who sometimes had mental health issues. That night, I set up a chair by the front window and waited. At 2 a.m. the singing started again. Same place, same time. But when I looked out the window, I didn't see anyone. The singing was coming from somewhere closer. It sounded like it was coming from inside the cabin. I grabbed a baseball bat and searched every room, every closet, every corner where someone could hide. Nothing. But the singing continued, that same wandering melody that never seemed to end. I spent the rest of the night in my truck in the driveway, engine running, ready to leave if I had to. The singing stopped around 3 a.m., but I didn't go back inside until sunrise. I packed my things that morning and drove back to town. I've been staying in a motel for the past week, trying to figure out what to do about the cabin. They never found who it was. The singing has stopped, according to the neighbors. But I'm not going back to find out. I'm putting the cabin up for sale. Someone else can deal with whatever's happening out there. I need to be around people, in a place where strange women don't sing lullabies on your porch at 2 in the morning. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more. And check the description to know how to submit your own true horror story. Until next time, Blurred Lines out.